The grand palace of the Rari Empire stood tall, towering above the alien city below. Its stone walls shimmered under the cold light of distant stars. The air was thick with the scent of ancient incense and the hum of palace servants carrying out their duties. Inside, the chambers were filled with priceless treasures and ornate decorations, all reflecting the immense power that Rylathor, the alien queen, held over her people. But tonight, the queen was not at ease. She walked slowly through her chambers, her movements deliberate, yet restless. Her sharp golden eyes flicked from one side of the room to the other, but her mind was elsewhere. The throne room had always been a place of power for her, but tonight it felt like a prison. It wasn't the weight of her crown or the heavy responsibility of ruling an empire that troubled her. No, it was something much deeper, a memory that refused to stay buried. The last time she had felt this way, it was before her life had completely changed, before the betrayal, before the war that tore her world apart, before she had lost him. Her mind wandered back to those days. His face. How could she forget it? The human she had loved so deeply, someone from another world who had shared her life for a brief time. They had been partners in more ways than one. They had fought side by side, striving for peace in a galaxy torn apart by conflict. But then, he was gone. She had lost him in a way that no one ever truly recovered from. The betrayal still stung years later. Yet fate had its own way of playing games. She had moved on, built her empire, and faced the galaxy with the iron will that had made her a feared ruler. But tonight, something felt different. Something in the air, something in the shadows, made her uneasy. The door to her chambers slid open with a soft hiss, and in stepped a figure. It was Liam, the human guard assigned to her by the Galactic Council. He was tall, with short-cropped hair and a gaze that never seemed to waver. He stood in the doorway, his hands at his sides, waiting for her to acknowledge his presence. The queen's heart skipped a beat. She had seen countless guards, countless humans who had served in various ways across the Empire, but there was something about him, something familiar. She blinked, trying to shake the feeling. No, it was impossible. She hadn't seen him before, at least not in this life. And yet, his eyes met hers, and for a brief moment the world seemed to stop. The blue of his eyes, the way he stood, his posture almost identical to that of the man she had once loved, the man she had thought lost forever. But how? The queen's thoughts raced. It couldn't be. He was human, a different generation. But the resemblance was too strong to ignore. Her breath caught in her throat, and she stepped back, her body tense. Her heart, once a fortress, now felt as fragile as glass. Liam stood silently, watching her. He could see the change in her demeanor, the way her expression shifted from calm to something unreadable. There was a weight in the room, a silent tension that made his breath hitch. He had always been trained to be alert, to never let his guard down, but something about this moment felt different. "Your Majesty," Liam said, his voice steady but soft. "You called for me?" The queen snapped out of her daze. She glanced at him, her mind still racing, trying to place the feeling that was gnawing at her. She forced herself to speak. "Yes, guard. I need to speak with you." Liam stepped forward cautiously, as if unsure of how to approach her. He had always been respectful, but tonight there was something in the air that made him nervous. "Sit," the queen ordered, gesturing to a chair across from her. Her voice was composed, but inside she was struggling to understand what she was feeling. Liam obeyed, sitting with his back straight, hands clasped in his lap. He was well-trained, disciplined, but the way the queen was looking at him made him feel like a child once again, like he had done something wrong. "I've noticed you," the queen began, her voice colder than before. "You remind me of someone I knew long ago, someone who—" She stopped herself, unwilling to finish the sentence. The memories were too painful. Liam furrowed his brow, confusion spreading across his face. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure what you mean." You don't know it," the Queen interrupted sharply. "But your eyes, your face, I've seen them before. It's almost as if you're someone I lost." Liam's eyes widened, but he said nothing. He didn't know what to say. How could he? What did this mean? He had heard of the Queen's past, her reputation as a ruthless ruler, her history of fighting wars, and the sacrifices she had made. But now, in the presence of this powerful figure, he felt small, uncertain. He opened his mouth to speak, but the Queen held up her hand to stop him. "Don't speak yet," she said. "I need to think." Her mind raced with questions she didn't have answers for. Why did he look so much like him? Could it be? Had fate brought him back into her life? Was it possible that this guard, this human, had somehow descended from the very man she had lost all those years ago? The Queen turned away from him, her golden eyes glimmering in the dim light. She wasn't sure how to handle this. This was not something she could explain, not something she could even understand herself, but she knew one thing. Her world had just been turned upside down. The Queen stood motionless in the dim light of her chamber, her thoughts swirling like a storm. Liam, the human guard, sat in silence, his eyes fixed on her. The tension between them was thick, almost suffocating. He had been trained for many things: combat, strategy, and loyalty to his superiors, but this was something entirely different. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. "You remind me of someone." He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of something he couldn't fully understand. How could he possibly remind her of someone from her past? He was just a soldier, a guard, nothing special. But the way she looked at him, as though she were seeing a ghost, made him question everything. For days, Liam found himself distracted, his thoughts always returning to that moment in the Queen's chambers. What did she mean? Who was this person she was talking about? Could it be someone from her past, someone she had lost? He had heard rumors about her, of course. She was the ruler of the Rari Empire, an alien queen feared across the galaxy for her strength and unyielding resolve. But beneath her icy exterior, was there something more? Meanwhile, Rylithor couldn't escape the memory of that encounter. She had spent her entire life hiding from her past, burying the pain of old wounds so that she could focus on ruling her empire. She had always believed that the past was something to be left behind, that it had no place in her present. But Liam had opened a door she wasn't ready to face. She hadn't meant to show him any weakness. She had always prided herself on being the ruler who controlled every situation, every emotion. But now, she felt like she was losing control. Every time she saw him, Liam's face brought back memories she thought she had locked away forever. His eyes were the same shade of blue as his ancestors. His posture, his movements, everything about him reminded her of the man she had once loved. It had been so long. The pain of losing him, of the betrayal that had shattered her world, still felt raw in her heart. She had never allowed herself to truly grieve. She couldn't afford to. As queen, she had responsibilities, an empire to protect. But now, standing before this human guard, she realized that she had never truly healed. The wound was still there, buried deep within her. And what if it wasn't just his face that reminded her of him? What if their bond ran deeper than mere resemblance? For the first time in years, Rylithor allowed herself to think of the past. She thought of the human soldier, the one who had been by her side during those early years of peace. He had been strong, noble, and kind. They had fought together, traveled together, and in the end, fallen in love. But war had a way of tearing everything apart. One day, He had simply disappeared. No trace, no explanation. Rylothor had searched for him, but he was gone. The galaxy had swallowed him whole, leaving her with nothing but memories, and now she was faced with the impossible. Was it possible that Liam was the descendant of that lost love? The thought tormented her. She couldn't bear the idea of losing another person she cared about, especially not someone who reminded her so much of him. Days passed in a blur of duty and silence between her and Liam. He continued his duties as her guard, but he could sense the distance in her eyes. She had become even more distant, more closed off than ever before. It was as if she was trying to push him away, as if she feared what would happen if they became too close. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Liam found himself beside her once more. He didn't speak at first, unsure of what to say. The air was thick with unspoken words, the silence between them both uncomfortable and heavy. Finally, Liam broke the silence. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice low but firm. "I don't understand. What do you mean when you say I remind you of someone?" The Queen's steps faltered. She had been expecting this question, but she had never prepared herself for it. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were now filled with a depth of emotion that Liam had never seen before. "It's difficult to explain," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "A long time ago, there was a man I loved. He was human, like you, and you—" She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The wind rustled the leaves around them, the only sound in the quiet garden. Liam didn't know what to say. His heart pounded in his chest, unsure whether to feel honored or uncomfortable by her words. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Could I really be related to this man? Was he someone important to you?" For a moment, Rylothor said nothing. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to find some sign that he was truly the one she had been waiting for. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "His name was Kale, and he was once my partner. We fought for peace, together, side by side, in a galaxy torn apart by war. But in the end, he disappeared, and I was left with nothing but his memory." She paused, her voice faltering slightly. "I never thought I would see someone like him again. But now, when I look at you, it's as if he's come back to me in some form." Liam felt his heart race. This was more than he had expected. He had never thought of himself as someone important, just a soldier, nothing more. But the Queen's words left him with more questions than answers. What was his connection to this man, this Kale? And why did it feel like the past was calling out to him, pulling him into a history he knew nothing about? The wind died down, and the garden grew quiet once more. Rylothor turned her gaze to the stars above them. "I need time to think," she whispered, more to herself than to Liam. But as the silence stretched between them, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the answers they were both seeking were closer than they realized. For the next several days, Rylothor couldn't shake the conversation from her mind. She had always prided herself on being in control of her emotions, her empire, and the many lives that relied on her decisions. But when she looked at Liam, she couldn't help but feel a connection to something she had long buried. A bond that she had once shared with Kale, the man who had been more than a partner to her. It was all too much. The memories were flooding back, impossible to ignore. Rylothor had once believed that the past was something that could be sealed away, that she could forget the hurt and move forward, but Liam's presence was like a key unlocking that door she had carefully locked shut. Meanwhile, Liam was equally troubled by the Queen's words. Every time he saw her, he saw a woman of incredible strength and power, someone who had built an empire from nothing, someone who commanded respect from every being in the galaxy. But beneath that strength, he saw something more, a sadness, a vulnerability that didn't belong to the person who ruled the stars. He had seen it once, just for a moment, in her eyes when she had spoken about Kale. He found himself thinking about her constantly, about the mystery of her past and what it meant for him. Why did she see him as someone connected to that man, a figure he knew nothing about? Was it possible that he really was connected to him, to Kale? The more Liam tried to focus on his duties, the more his thoughts strayed back to the Queen. He couldn't help but notice how much he resembled this long-lost lover of hers. The way she looked at him, the way her hands shook slightly when she spoke about him. It was as though the past was still alive for her, just beneath the surface. And it made him uneasy, as if she expected something from him that he couldn't give. One evening, the Queen sent for him. Liam arrived at her chambers, his heart beating faster than usual. The guards who had escorted him didn't say anything, but he could see the shift in their eyes, the same eyes that had followed him ever since he first stepped into the Queen's service. They had been watching him more closely these days, as though they knew something he didn't. When he stepped into the room, Rylathor was standing by a large window, gazing out at the stars. The cool light of distant galaxies filtered through the glass, casting shadows on her face. She looked almost serene, but Liam could sense that she wasn't at peace. Her back was straight, as it always was, but there was a heaviness to her posture. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice low but firm. Liam nodded, unsure of what to expect. He had seen many things in his time as a soldier, but he knew better than to assume anything when it came to the Queen. She was always full of surprises. Rylathor gestured to a nearby console, and with a few quick movements, a hologram flickered to life in front of them. It was an old image, grainy and worn. The figure in the hologram was familiar. He looked just like Liam. His face, his eyes, even the way he held himself. It was all the same. "This is Kale," she said softly. "He was my partner once. A human, just like you." Liam stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. The man in the hologram was almost identical to him. His mind raced as he tried to understand what this meant. Could he really be connected to this person in some way? "This is the man I loved," Rylathor continued, her voice shaking slightly. "We fought together in wars, struggled together, and in the end, we lost each other. I thought I would never see anyone like him again." The weight of her words sank in. Liam stood there, his body tense, unsure of what to say. He had no memory of this man, no connection to him beyond the resemblance he now understood. But he couldn't ignore the way the Queen was looking at him, like he was a part of something far bigger than himself. "I don't understand," Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. "Why do you think I'm connected to him? I have no memory of him, of anything like that." Rylathor turned toward him, her golden eyes fixed on his. "You don't have to remember him, Liam. Your face, your eyes, they are his. It's as if he's been reborn in you, and I cannot ignore that. It's a connection that I cannot explain, but I feel it. Deep down, I feel it." The room grew quiet as they both took in the gravity of the moment. Liam felt the weight of the Queen's gaze, the burden of her past pressing down on him. What was she asking of him? What did she want from him? For a moment there was silence between them, a silence that was filled with the weight of their shared past and the uncertainty of their future. Finally, Liam spoke. "What do you want me to do? I can't change who I am, and I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. But if this connection means something to you, I'll try to understand it. I'll try to be there for you, just like he would have been." Rylathor looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening ever so slightly. She had always been a ruler, always in control. But in that moment, she allowed herself to feel something else. something real. She hadn't expected Liam to understand. Not fully, but she had hoped he would try. And he had. "You don't have to be him," she said softly. "But your presence here, it brings me comfort. I've spent so many years hiding from the past, but you—" She stopped, her voice faltering. "You make me want to face it." Liam nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He wasn't sure where this path would lead, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a guard. He was a part of something much larger, something that could change everything for both of them. The days after their conversation were strange. Rylathor felt an unfamiliar tension in her chest. The presence of Liam, the human guard who had now become a constant figure in her life, was unsettling in ways she didn't fully understand. She had always kept her emotions locked away, buried beneath the cold armor of her title as queen. But now, every time she saw him, it was like that armor was starting to crack. It wasn't just his resemblance to Kale that troubled her. It was the feeling that somehow Liam carried with him the weight of everything she had lost, everything she had tried to forget. Yet, unlike Kale, Liam was here. He was alive, breathing, and standing in front of her. And in a way, that terrified her. For Liam, things were no less complicated. He had never expected to find himself in the midst of a situation like this. A simple soldier doing his duty was now caught up in a mystery that reached far into the past. The more he thought about it, the less he understood. Why did he look like this lost figure from the Queen's history? And why did it seem like he was being drawn into something far bigger than himself? He couldn't deny the connection. He felt to Rylathor, but it wasn't just because of his appearance. There was something else. Something in the way she looked at him. Something in her eyes that made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a great unknown. But Liam wasn't a man who believed in fate or destiny. He believed in what he could see, what he could control. And he wasn't sure what was happening between them, but he knew it was dangerous to get too close. The Queen, despite her regal demeanor, had her own doubts. She found herself thinking about Liam more and more, her mind often drifting back to the days when she had been in love with Kale. The memories came to her uninvited. The laughter they shared, the battles they fought side by side, the quiet moments when it had just been the two of them facing the universe together. But all of that had been ripped away in an instant, leaving her heart broken and her spirit guarded. Now with Liam, it felt as though that pain was coming back to life. The connection she felt toward him was undeniable, yet so dangerous. Could she really open herself up again? Could she trust him? Days turned into weeks, and Liam continued his duty as the Queen's personal guard, though the tension between them never seemed to ease. It was during one of these quiet moments that everything would change. The palace had been tense for days. Whispers of unrest spread through the empire like wildfire. A rebellion was brewing on the fringes of Rylathor's territories. The rebels, seeing a chance to strike when the Queen seemed distracted, were making their move. And the Queen, knowing that this could be the beginning of a war, couldn't afford to wait any longer. She had to act. She summoned Liam to her private chambers one evening, the air thick with the tension of impending conflict. As he stepped into the room, he was greeted not by the usual silence, but by a sense of urgency in the Queen's eyes. "We must prepare," Rylathor said, her voice steady but sharp. "The rebels are closer than we thought. I need your help." "Liam!" It was the first time she had directly involved him in something this serious. In the past, Liam had been just a soldier, duty-bound, silent, and unremarkable. But now, it seemed like he was being drawn into something that was no longer just about his resemblance to Kyle. "I'm ready, Your Majesty," he said, meeting her gaze without hesitation. He had always been loyal to his duty. But something about this situation felt different. There was more at stake than just his role as a guard. Rylathor nodded. I need someone I can trust, and though I have many soldiers under my command, you are the one who understands what's at stake. I'm not just leading an empire now. I'm leading the last of my people, my legacy. I cannot afford to fail again. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had never considered the weight of her role, the responsibility she carried. Rylathor was more than a ruler. She was the last of her kind, and the rebellion posed a threat not only to her reign, but to the survival of her people. I'll do whatever it takes, Liam said, his voice unwavering. He had always been a soldier, but now he felt as though he was on the verge of becoming something more, something tied to the past, and something that could shape the future. Rylathor turned to face the window, staring out at the vast city below, the lights flickering like stars. I've lost too much already, Liam. I can't lose everything now. I can't lose myself. The vulnerability in her voice surprised him. For all her strength, for all the power she commanded, there was something deeply human in her. It was a side of her he hadn't expected, a side he hadn't even known existed. Without thinking, he stepped closer to her, standing beside her at the window. You won't lose me, he said softly. Not now. Not ever. The words hung in the air between them, more powerful than any weapon in the galaxy. They weren't just words of loyalty. They were words of connection, of understanding. In that moment, Liam realized that whatever he had felt for Rylathor in the past was no longer about his resemblance to Kale. It was about who they were now and the role they would play in the future. Rylathor turned to him, her eyes searching. His. For a moment, it felt as if everything between them had shifted, as if they had crossed some invisible line. She was no longer just the queen, and he was no longer just a guard. They were partners now, bound not just by duty, but by something deeper, something they could no longer deny. The battle was fast approaching. Word had spread throughout the Empire that the rebels were getting closer, their forces growing stronger with every passing day. The tension inside the palace was palpable, and every corner of the once peaceful halls now seemed filled with whispers of war. Rylathor stood at the head of her council, the weight of the Empire pressing down on her shoulders. Her thoughts drifted back to the night she had confided in Liam, and the connection that had grown between them. It had been unexpected, but undeniable. She had always been in control, but now, with him by her side, it felt like something had shifted inside her, a shift she didn't know how to handle. In the days that followed, Liam had proven himself more than just a soldier. His unwavering loyalty to her, combined with his sharp mind, had made him a valuable ally. He wasn't just protecting her, he was helping her understand the threat that loomed ahead. As they stood in the war room, Rylathor turned to Liam, her golden eyes scanning his face. There was something about him that made her feel grounded, something she hadn't felt in years. She realized that she wasn't just relying on him out of duty. There was a deeper connection, one that made her feel like they were two halves of something greater. The rebellion is closer than we thought, she said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. They've made alliances with the other factions on the Outer Rim. They're gathering forces for a final strike against us. Liam looked at her, his face hardening with resolve. We're ready, Your Majesty. We've trained the soldiers and the defenses are in place, but we both know that a battle of this magnitude will require more than just weapons. She nodded, her gaze never leaving him. Yes, I need more than just soldiers. I need someone who can unite my people, who can give them hope. Someone they can believe in. Liam raised an eyebrow. And you think that person is me? I think it could be, she said quietly. You remind them of something they've lost, the strength of the human warriors who once stood by my side. Kyle was their symbol of hope, and now, maybe, you can be. It was a heavy thought, one that made Liam feel the weight of his role even more. He had never considered himself a symbol of anything. He was just a man doing his duty. But in that moment, he understood what the Queen was asking of him. She wasn't just asking him to fight. She was asking him to become something more, a beacon of hope for her people. The next few days were a blur of strategy and preparation. The palace had been transformed into a war room, with soldiers and commanders working tirelessly to ready themselves for the battle ahead. Liam was at the Queen's side every step of the way, ensuring that the plans were executed flawlessly. But even in the midst of all the chaos, there was a quiet understanding between them, a silent bond that grew stronger with each passing hour. As the day of the battle approached, Rylithor found herself staring out at the horizon from her private balcony. The stars had always been her comfort, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the smallness of her empire. But tonight, the stars felt different. They were cold and distant, like the future itself, full of uncertainty and darkness. Liam stood beside her, his presence a quiet strength she had come to rely on. He didn't say anything at first, but after a long silence, he spoke. "You know," he began, "I've never been one for speeches. I've always believed in action over words." She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "And what action do you believe in?" "I believe in fighting for what's right," Liam said, his voice calm but steady. "I believe in standing with the people who need you, even when it seems impossible. And I believe that no matter what happens, we fight for each other." For a brief moment, Rylithor smiled, the faintest hint of hope flickering in her eyes. "I think I'm starting to understand why I trust you." The words lingered between them, more powerful than any weapon. For the first time in what felt like years, Rylithor allowed herself to feel something other than the cold weight of responsibility. She allowed herself to feel hope. The night before the battle, as the preparations were finalized, Liam found himself standing alone in the barracks. The tension in the air was thick, and soldiers whispered about the coming battle, their nerves palpable. Liam knew that tomorrow would change everything. The outcome of this fight would determine the fate of the Rari Empire and of the Queen herself. He couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to the Queen, to the trust she had placed in him, and to the strange bond that had formed between them. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He would fight for her people, and for whatever future they might have together. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the city, Liam stood at the front of the palace gates, his armor gleaming in the morning sun. The soldiers gathered behind him, their faces determined but fearful. He could feel the weight of their hopes resting on his shoulders, but he wasn't alone. Rylithor stood beside him, her own face set with determination. Together, they would face the rebellion. Together, they would fight for a future that none of them could fully predict. The battle was fierce. The air was thick with the sound of clashing weapons and the roar of soldiers as they fought on both sides of the battlefield. Rylithor stood at the forefront, her armor shining under the harsh light of the twin suns above. Beside her was Liam, his face set with determination, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. They had both prepared for this moment for weeks, knowing that the future of the Rari Empire rested on their shoulders. Despite the chaos around them, there was a calmness between them, a silent understanding that they were in this together. Their bond, once tentative, had solidified over the course of their preparation. Liam had grown to respect the Queen not only for her strength, but for her resilience. And in turn, Rylithor had come to see Liam as more than just a guard. He was a partner in every sense of the word. As the battle raged on, Rylithor and Liam fought side by side, their movements synchronized as if they had been doing this for years. The soldiers around them followed their lead, their morale lifted by the presence of the Queen and the human warrior at the head of the fight. For the first time, Liam understood what the queen had meant when she said he reminded her of Kale. He was more than just a soldier. He was a symbol of hope, a beacon for those who had lost everything. But the rebellion wasn't backing down. Every step forward was met with resistance, and the rebel forces seemed to be everywhere, attacking from every angle. Liam could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him, the sharp sting of exhaustion seeping into his bones. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. They fought their way to the heart of the battlefield, where the rebel leader Thalion awaited them. Thalion was a man with a vision, someone who believed that the Rari Empire had lost its way and needed to be toppled. He was fierce, his eyes burning with the fire of someone who thought he was fighting for the greater good. But to Rylathor, he was just another enemy, someone who sought to destroy everything she had worked for. When Rylathor and Liam finally reached Thalion, the battle around them seemed to fade into the background. The rebel leader was waiting, standing, tall with his weapon in hand, his eyes locked onto Rylathor, and a cold smile spread across his face. So the queen finally shows up, Thalion said, his voice filled with disdain. I've been waiting for this moment, Rylathor. You and your empire are nothing but a shadow of what they once were. Your people have suffered for too long under your rule. It's time for change. Rylathor didn't flinch. She stood tall, her eyes unwavering as she stared at Thalion. You speak of change, she said, her voice steady. But all you offer is destruction. You don't understand what it means to lead. You don't understand the sacrifices that must be made for the good of all. Liam stepped forward, his presence a silent threat. He had fought beside Rylathor through this entire battle, and he wouldn't allow this man to take anything from her. Not now. Your vision is flawed, Thalion, he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. You think you can rebuild the galaxy on destruction? But you're wrong. We're not here to tear everything down. We're here to protect what's worth saving. Thalion laughed, the sound echoing in the midst of the battle. And what is worth saving? A broken empire? A queen who hides behind her title while her people starve and suffer? You're both fools. Before Rylathor could respond, Thalion lunged, his blade aimed directly at her. Liam was quicker, stepping in front of her and deflecting the strike with his own sword. The two men locked eyes, each filled with the determination to protect everything they believed in. The battle between them was swift and brutal. Liam fought with everything he had, his movements fueled by the weight of the Queen's trust and the future of the Empire. Thalion, though a skilled fighter, was no match for the strength of Liam's resolve. With a final, powerful strike, Liam disarmed the rebel leader, sending his weapon crashing to the ground. For a moment, there was silence. Thalion stood there, breathing heavily, his eyes filled with rage and disbelief. He had been defeated. But in that moment, it wasn't just about winning the fight. It was about something deeper. Liam and Rylathor had proven that they were stronger together than the rebels had ever anticipated. You've lost, Rylathor said, her voice cold but steady. Your rebellion is over. Thalion glared at her, but he didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. He had underestimated the strength of the queen and the human warrior who stood beside her. With the leader defeated, the remaining rebels began to retreat, their morale shattered. The Rari soldiers, led by Liam and Rylathor, pressed forward, quickly gaining control of the battlefield. It was over. The rebellion had been crushed, and peace had been restored to the Empire. As the last of the rebels fled, Liam turned to the Queen, his expression weary but resolute. It's over, Your Majesty. Rylathor nodded, her gaze turning to the horizon. The battle was won, but the war for her people's future had only just begun. We've won today, she said quietly, but there is still much to rebuild. Liam stood beside her, his presence a quiet comfort. "We'll rebuild it together," he said. The two of them stood there, watching as the last of the fighting ended. It was the beginning of a new era, one where Rylithor and Liam would lead not just as ruler and soldier, but as partners, fighting for a future worth saving. The days after the battle felt like a quiet storm. The dust had settled, and the fires of war were no longer raging. Yet the victory left behind a weight, a sense of duty and responsibility that hung heavily over Rylithor and Liam. The Rari Empire had survived the rebellion, but now the true challenge awaited them: rebuilding what had been broken. The palace, once filled with the sounds of battle, was now eerily quiet. Rylithor had returned to her chambers, standing alone in the dim light. She had always been strong, a ruler who had never let her emotions show. But now, standing by the window, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. She had lost so much: people, alliances, trust. But in the aftermath of the war, she had gained something too. Liam had become more than just her guard. Over the course of the battle, their connection had deepened. They had fought together, side by side, and had come to rely on one another in ways that neither of them had anticipated. The quiet moments between them, the small exchanges of trust, had become a part of something bigger. He had been by her side during the battle, and now he was here as her ally in the rebuilding of the Empire. He had never expected any of this. To be thrust into the heart of a war, to be drawn into the complexities of leadership, was nothing he had ever prepared for. But as he walked through the halls of the palace, he couldn't ignore the feeling that something had changed. Something deep inside him had shifted. Rylithor heard the footsteps behind her, but she didn't turn. She already knew it was him. It had become natural for them to move through the palace together, even when there was nothing to say. Liam approached her, standing silently for a moment before speaking. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "we've finished the first phase of the reconstruction. The city is safe, and we've begun to restore what was lost." She nodded, still staring out at the horizon. "It's only the beginning," she murmured. "The damage is done, and the scars will take time to heal." Liam stepped closer, his presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this. "You've done more than anyone could have expected. You've saved your people." For a moment, Rylithor allowed herself to take a deep breath, letting the words sink in. Liam was right, but there was more. She had saved her people, yes, but there was still so much to rebuild, physically, emotionally, and politically. The Empire had been shaken, and some of her people still questioned her rule. "What about the people who supported Thalion?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What will happen to them?" Liam was silent for a moment, understanding the depth of her concerns. "We'll give them a chance to surrender. We can't afford to continue fighting, but they'll have to prove their loyalty to you. There will be a cost to their rebellion, but I believe they'll choose peace." Her eyes softened at his words. Liam had a way of seeing things clearly, of making the complicated feel manageable. In many ways, he had become her anchor. She had learned to trust him, to lean on him when she needed to. "It's not just about peace," she said, turning to face him. "It's about trust. How do I rebuild that? After everything that's happened, how can I trust anyone again?" Liam looked at her, his gaze steady. "You don't have to trust everyone right away. Trust is something that's earned. But you don't have to do it alone. You've got your people, and you've got me. I'll stand by you." His words settled in her heart like a promise, one that she hadn't realized she needed to hear. Rylithor had spent so long carrying the weight of her empire, never allowing anyone close enough to help her bear it. But now, she could see that. She didn't have to carry it alone. The quiet between them deepened, but it was a comfortable silence. A silence built on understanding and shared experiences. Rylathor had always been the ruler, the one who had to make the difficult decisions. But in Liam, she had found someone who not only supported her, but believed in her. Someone who saw her not just as a queen, but as a person. "I've been thinking," Rylathor said finally, breaking the silence, "about what comes next. The Empire is fractured, and there are factions within that still need to be united. The rebellion might be over, but there are others who are waiting for a chance to rise." Liam nodded, his expression serious. "We'll have to rebuild the trust with the people. They need to see that you're committed to change, to creating a future where they feel safe." "That's the hardest part," she admitted. "After the war, after the loss, how do we convince them that it's worth it, that I'm worth following?" Liam stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. "You already have their loyalty. It's not about convincing them, it's about showing them who you are. You've already proven yourself as a leader. Now you just need to show them the humanity behind the crown." Her eyes met his, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in something beyond the weight of her crown. There was hope in his words. Real, honest hope. "Thank you, Liam," she said softly. "For everything." He gave her a small smile, his expression gentle. "I'm not going anywhere, Your Majesty. We'll do this together." As they stood there side by side, something shifted between them. The future wasn't clear, but they knew that they would face it together. With Liam by her side, Rylathor felt a sense of peace that she hadn't known in years. They were more than ruler and guard. They were partners, united by a bond that had been forged in battle and strengthened by trust.